my name is Hensi and I'm the managing partner of the Council Services. Today I'm joined by Frederik, the CEO of Cardano Foundation. Frederik, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for inviting. I'm very honored.
Frederik, give our viewers a little bit of a foundation on Cardano Foundation.
So the Cardano Foundation is a Swiss non-for-profit foundation which is tasked with basically the longevity of the Cardano protocol. That means that we are optimizing towards decisions which will impact Cardano in the next 10 to 20 years. Now, the reason why the Cardano Foundation is different and can be a non-for-profit like we are is because we actually didn't do any ICO. We don't control the monetary policy, we cannot mint any tokens, and we don't control the blockchain. That allows us to work very close with regulators and other people who actually need to have insight into blockchain and take a little bit more risk on that end, where other blockchain foundations are differently exposed because they control the monetary policy and they would rather stay away from the fight. So one of the things we do is we fight for the adoption of blockchain worldwide to ensure that the whole population of this spaceship we call Earth can benefit from it. No matter what country you're from, no matter what side of a border you're born in or what culture, you should have access to this wonderful technology, and it will bring you economic opportunities wherever you are. We see very often that people have to move country or they have to move from the community where they're born due to economic opportunities. But Cardano is now so big that it can give you economic opportunities many places without you having to leave the community or the little state or the little city you're from. So you can be with your family and still get economic opportunities.
So Frederik, from what I understand, you have worked with most of the regulators that are out there, right? Now, in the UAE, our regulations are still forming. So if I was to ask you, because I know it would take so much time to go into all of the different regulators, but if I was to ask you, what are some of the main points that you have come across with other regulators which you think would be beneficial for us to implement over here?
So I think first and foremost, the UAE has done amazingly well in being very transparent and having a principle-based part on it. The other part which I really like is there's a little bit of friendly competition between some of the lower level regulators here, right? But there is still a federal regulator, and I think specifically what they're doing with the multilateral trading facility license is simply very well accepted out there. What the UAE is also doing, which is very interesting, is that they're paying attention to Singapore and to Switzerland, which in my world is actually leading the regulatory forefront within blockchain and AI. So they basically take inspiration from other places where growth is happening, where opportunities are being created. They take it back here, and then they think about how will we implement that based on the heritage of the UAE and based on where they want to position themselves. And I think this is a very interesting way of doing it, but it also means that a lot of the blockchain ecosystem is coming here because you can actually get a clear understanding of what goes and what doesn't go. Now, where I do feel we could, look a little bit deeper, but it's not necessary because there is rules already, but that is the part when it becomes critical infrastructure. So to my knowledge, UAE has not been looking at something similar like DORA or other things which we have in the European Union. And that's also because a lot of the initial wave has been around cryptocurrencies. What we are sort of pushing from the Cardano Foundation is enterprise adoption and really sort of like a foundational usage also for nation states and critical infrastructure. And that's where the level of maturity of the technology really is coming now.
So you touched on so many interesting points there. 3 of them that I'd like to pick up in the next set of questions would be, let's talk a little bit more about the process-based approach to regulation, also about what's happening in Singapore that you mentioned, and then also the other uses for blockchain,
Yeah.
because
So if we start with Switzerland, for instance, right? So Switzerland has just gone through a process where they were looking at staking. And as you know, Ethereum has moved from proof of work to proof of stake, and that means that a lot of regulators are looking actually what is the incentive structure, what is the cash flows, is there any smart contracts or capital markets contract involved? And in the industry, we think about 3 things. We think about slashing, ownership change, and we think about a lock-in period. And what FINMA really did is that they really sat down and they understood what that means, and they said, sorry, this is actually a banking activity. So if you are an intermediary like a broker or so on, you actually need to have a certain license to do certain things. we then exposed, and we have done that for a while, a RegTech tool we built for blockchain, which actually showcases how proof of stake works with Cardano. And based on that came a FINMA regulatory guidance around proof of stake, which very clearly says that it's no longer about a single approach. Blockchain is blockchain. We actually need to look into under the hood and understand these incentives and these structures what's happening. And that means that Cardano, for example, is not a banking activity when you do staking in Switzerland.
Mm-hmm. So I have always thought that a process-based approach to regulation would be better in this space, right? Because a principles-based approach, because we're looking at principles which can then be adopted for various different things. But when we were speaking earlier, you said that there was concerns with that, or there was issues with that when applying it. So can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think the issue is that very often when we say principle-based, we don't go deep enough. So like a typical principle is proof of stake will be regulated like X. The problem is that we as the industry in blockchain, we've been also a little bit marketing driven, right? So when we say proof of stake, what do we actually mean, right? Because this can be implemented in different ways, which according to the current regulation, by the way, also in UAE, actually has an impact. We use terms like a non-fungible token or an NFT. And most people will think, oh, this is something to do with like a digital picture or something like that, and it's an art form. But you can actually also use NFTs to do authentication or access restrictions in a multi-sig wallet. Or you can do what we did when we planted 1 million trees in Kenya. Every single tree has an NFT where there is some dynamic information from the growth of the tree, the acidity of the earth, and there's some static information, including the regulatory information of that particular tree, which basically then issues a carbon certificate. And that means that sometimes we are a little bit too fast and say, oh, this is a cryptocurrency, or this is an NFT, or this is staking. And I think what we need to do is really talk about what is it actually it does, or what does it do. So we created a little bit of a minefield for ourselves, and I see it as our job to explain this to regulators so they can take a good approach on how to do that. And in order to do that, we need to be way more transparent about how the blockchain works, but also how the applications on the blockchain work. And we cannot expect every regulator to hire hundreds of engineers to look at the code. So we built a RegTech tool who basically shows these workflows and business processes which lawyers are used to looking at. And we have some small educational modules who doesn't speak about the actual legal impact, but it gives you the foundational stones to interpret that in your legal framework. And we're having really good success with people actually looking at that. And some regulators even asked us, can you build something like that for Ethereum or Bitcoin and so on? And it is something we're considering, but for now we've made it all open source, and we even made an API available, so sophisticated regulators can consume this through an API.
So what you're talking about is the Cardano Explorer?
Yeah, so this is there's many Cardano Explorers. There's some really good community-made ones, but this is a specific Explorer from the Cardano Foundation, and we can put a link into the show notes that people can test this out. And it also speaks about the governance, because I don't know if you're familiar with it, but there's this big discussion about if you're decentralized, there's no regulatory problems. The problem is, what do you mean about decentralized? Does decentralized means that you have decentralized hardware? Is it software? Is it consensus? Is it who controls the monetary policy? Is it the consensus algorithm? And so basically, what we've basically exposed in the first version of the Explorer is who takes which decisions and why. And now in 70 days or plus minus, we're going to do something called a Chang hard fork, which is going to introduce a tricameral model on Cardano. So this will be the most sophisticated online governance model in the world, with digital politicians, judges, and so on, and a constitution which needs to be maintained.
Wow, that's incredible. I look forward to seeing that once it's available. But let me ask you this, because look, we're quick to say, oh, these regulations don't fit, right? These regulations don't fit. But we have to start somewhere. Like, I understand that maybe the regulations, when they're first starting, right, are not going to be able to encapsulate or account for all of these different things. But then how do we approach early stage regulation? Because yes, the laws early stage are not going to fit. But then how do we do it if we don't do it as a principle-based approach and they're not?
Well, I'm okay doing it principle-based. I just think you cannot work with first-level principles. You need to have second-level principles. So, for instance, there's been a few countries who introduced something called like a token classification. So they said,
Liechtenstein, I think, is one of them.
Liechtenstein has done that. Switzerland has done that. Australia is actually working on this right now. And they basically said, okay, here's a framework, and there is like different buckets, and there's a bucket where, if you don't fit in the others, you're here, and then we need to look at you bespoke. But that basically means that you can actually go in and say, what is the purpose of the token? What is it supposed to do? What is the incentive mechanism? What is the control factors? And that allows you to basically put yourself into a box. And that also lowers the constraints from the regulator, because they actually now have a standard or a reference framework, which is not about interpreting a first level principle, but actually, where you can go in and say bespoke, this is this, this is that. And then you only need to deal with the tailwind of the cases. So I think my argumentation is just that, the very high first level is just not enough. It doesn't give you the speed, the agility you're looking for, and it potentially creates a little bit too much risk for certain countries. But that's up to the country to decide. But I think what you have to be aware of, which is very crucial, is that these blockchains, they jump borders. And for many of the blockchain types, that's actually the purpose. And this is actually not about regulatory arbitrage. This is actually how the internet works today. And that means that there is potentially a larger lack about thinking about a future setup for regulators at large. Because today we really think about your national persons and we think about companies. But what if it's a robot? What if it's software? What if it's a person who does not have a national identity, right? And how do we ensure that we can encompass that and build a larger market? And I think there is still some work to be done, but that's not just isolated to blockchain. And I think there, if you do like the UK had a blockchain sandbox, right? And then there's an AI sandbox, and there's a fintech sandbox, and then there's multiple things. You actually miss the point. What you really need is a technology sandbox where you can look at this from different angles, because all of this is correlated. And these technologies, they live together across borders, across culture. And that's what makes them so interesting and makes them scale.
So earlier you said to me and I agree with you, that the Web3 space is becoming, and this is exactly what you were just describing, it's becoming too cryptocurrency centric, right? Like when we think about Web3, when we think about blockchain, that's what we focus on. But there's plenty of other use cases for this. So how can we shift the thinking? And then just to finish off, if you could tell us some exciting projects that Cardano Foundation is working on, because you mentioned some earlier that implement this, I'm sure the listeners would be interested to hear those as well.
Well, I don't think it's about shifting the process. I think it's about a balancing act, right? So right now, what we do know is there's a large appetite for different types of cryptocurrencies. And I'm actually a big believer in cryptocurrencies, and I do think that Bitcoin has paved the way for a new world society where we potentially one day will have a new secondary reserve currency, which is based on algorithms and not based on political power. So I think there's a lot of advantages in this. But what we've not been so good at is actually bridging the blockchain with other technologies. What I mean about that is that, how do we get to a situation that you can open up use cases for the general industry? Blockchain works very well if it's born digital and it dies digital. Money does that, financial markets does that at length, right? But you can quickly go to a real world tokenization, real estate. If you have real estate, well, that's not digital anymore, right? So there's something with a title register, there's something with the housing permits, there's something about the carbon footprint if you're building a structural skyscraper, right? So there's a lot of different things who comes into it. And a lot of work from the Cardano Foundation is going into how do you bridge different technologies to the blockchain, that you have a situation that this become a much larger ecosystem, solving a bigger problem.
So to finish off then, when we were speaking earlier, you were telling me about some exciting projects, which you already mentioned. You already mentioned planting the trees and then having the NFTs so that people can have the information with regards to the tree that was planted. But I'm sure there are other exciting? Just give me like one of your favorites that's on the go right now, and we'll end
So-
on that note.
One of my favorites at the moment is the Dubai Police.
Okay.
So the Dubai Police is extremely visionary, and and they really want to have a safe society where everybody can work well together. And they're very digital already. But there's also some global agencies who are saying, you know what, the more we can lower global crime by forensic work, the better it is. The trade-off of that is that you basically give identity away to a global agency, right? And we just have to say, like, countries like Dubai is a very little country. So if the US or Russia or China really leans in on a global agency, it's hard for them, or it's hard to understand if there is a backdoor to some of this information. So we designed something which is like an early version of zero knowledge proof. It's a one-way hash algorithm, which basically allows you to upload fingerprints or ballistic 3D rendering of bullets into a database. So you cannot go back and actually see the original imaging, but you can have a data file you can compare with. Then another jurisdiction, whether it's Belgium or the US, can then see on a crime scene, they find this fingerprint or ballistics, right? And they can compare this with this database, and they can say, oh, there's a 92% match. Now, they don't know that this is coming from Dubai. The Dubai police, they can then upload they upload like a little data file saying we found a 92% match. And now the processes in Dubai is such that they can decide whether or not they want to engage with Belgium, because 92 might not be high enough for them. Maybe 94 is their limit. But now it's reverse solicitation in accordance with privacy law, right? And your private identifying data from this country does not leave you, which basically means that you can now use this decentralized world of sharing data because you can separate the proof from the actual transaction. And we are very excited about going into pilot with both of them with the Dubai Police, and it was just announced at the Dubai World Police Summit a couple of weeks back, and it drew a lot of attention because people always think about something called CK SNARKs and zero knowledge proof, which is very advanced cryptographics. But what we're actually doing here is we are helping Dubai to be a sovereign state, protecting its citizens, but still solving global crime, plus being a world leader in going to poorer countries and helping them on the digital transformation journey, because that will just bring more of these proofs up there, right? Which basically will create this global database without identities being, readily available in centralized storage.
I was waiting when the day for something like this would come, because essentially blockchain is a verification system, right?
Yeah.
So it would make sense to use it in ways like this. So well done.
Well, we're not there yet. We're in the pilot phase, right? The police force is very engaged. We are as well. And we really think this can work. And our hope is that Interpol will also take that on. So
Frederik, you need to get on stage. I can see that there. Thank you so much for your time. It was.
Thank you.
It was
and
fun.
anytime I'm here for you. We will have the Cardano Summit in October. I really hope you will join. There will be multiple regulators, and we're bringing about 2,000 people together here, from Fortune 500 companies to engineers to scientists, all to celebrate blockchain and enterprise adoption.
We would be delighted. Hopefully we can do another interview then.
Lovely, yeah. Tickets are for sale now, and some of them are nearly sold out already after 48 hours.
I can imagine. So everyone get your ticket now.
Yeah.
All right, Frederik.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.